We were actually very busy. It's that kind of starts our busy project season. So summertime becomes our project season. This was May. Schools are getting ready to get out. A lot of doctors' offices are getting ready to go on lower staffing because doctors want to take vacation with their families and children, etc. So when school lets out, that basically is when we come in to do project work. So we had a lot of projects on the board. We were getting ready to do a lot of new installs, a lot of server installs. We were doing really well for the year. We were actually up for the year. So it was great. Times were good. We were excited. We had a lot of things on the board getting ready to go. So we were very busy. There's a couple of things to consider, really. We were involved with our clients with data loss and issues even before the tornado. Obviously, the tornado was the icing on the cake, but we've actually had clients where people have broken into their offices, they've stole computers, they've stole equipment, and people realize that this equipment now is worth money because it's got records on it that are valuable. So, for instance, in our case, people have patient names, social securities, birthdays, next of kins. All that stuff is what you need for banks to actually open accounts with. So those become valuable. A lot of people say that my data is only valuable to me. Your data is valuable to others because you have client information. You have the things that are important to somebody that's trying to do evil, and that's important. So, we addressed a lot of stuff with theft, a lot of stuff with just small office disasters. That was lightning taking servers out, fire, a lot of what was considered, or employee theft, just employees being stupid, accidentally deleting files that they weren't supposed to. So disaster from a tornado perspective, while the possibilities are not odd, that just the likelihood of having a disaster on a global scale or a much larger scale, such as fire, theft, etc., is significantly higher. So obviously we have the discussion with our clients that it's absolutely important that they have backups, and we don't look at backups as just backup, we look at it as continuity of business. So the discussion we have is not, oh, do you have a tape from last night, because we don't really care about the tape. When you go through some sort of a business disaster, your goal as the CEO of your company should be to recover business processes back. IT part is just a small piece of it, but you have accounts receivable, you have payable, you have everything, order entry, you got marketing, you got sales, people have to get paid, you got payroll to actually match, you got taxes you got to do. So that's a business process that has to go back in place. Everybody says, well, I just use my computers for this. But what they don't understand is the whole business process has to get back up and running in case of a disaster, to varying degrees. I mean, obviously in case of a tornado, it's all gone and you have to recover it. But in case of employee theft, it might affect AR, AP, and payroll. Or, there's different parts of it, and you have to be able to recover that from a business continuity. So again, it's not backup, it's business continuity, and that's what a lot of folks misinterpret or misunderstand with when we talk about business continuity. Okay, so obviously we got hit with basically the most devastating tornado that it's been on record since 1950 something, right? And we lost our offices. It was 100% loss, and we lost half of our clients. And by half of our clients, I mean their building was not inhabitable. It was completely gone, destroyed, no equipment. Couldn't salvage equipment, couldn't get, in many places couldn't even get in the office to get the equipment because there was really no office left and there was no equipment to be found. So that is what we walked into that Sunday evening, Monday morning. Our goal was to actually have everyone up before the following Friday. So we had set a goal of expectation of 5 days for our clients. We had everybody up in 72 hours. And again, the problem wasn't that it took 72 hours. The problem was we knew we had everything in place. We had everything we needed to actually get these people back up and running. There was just on such huge scale, it was on such an enormous scale that we just didn't have enough manpower to get people up and running. So we had to make very difficult decisions. Do you want to bring pediatrics up before geriatrics? Do you want to bring cancer patients before you have to make these tough decisions at that time, and then we, I guess, chose correctly. So we brought children up first, we brought geriatrics, so cancer patients get their their chemotherapy, drugs, and medication, and then we brought family practice because that was important for people to get their prescriptions for their houses that they lost their prescriptions, etc. So we made some very, very tough decisions, and some were good, some were bad, but altogether everybody was up in 72 hours, which was the key. Well, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, each of the different types of companies that get hits, for example, HIPAA is very important with healthcare. PCI and Sarbanes-Oxley would become important in banking, or if you take credit cards, etc. Those records are available. Those records are on that equipment. So our goal was to make sure that we actually had a secure way of storing this on our backup equipment, that stuff is in place. But what happens if you can't find it? Do you know the list of all the patients that you lost their records for? Because you have to notify them. Do you know the list of all the credit cards that you may have had on file? How are you going to recreate that to let them know, hey, we might have got hit, we might have been affected, somebody may have stolen our server, somebody may have stolen, or we may have had to burn, something, etc. How do you notify the customers that may have been affected by negligence, by some issue, without having that list in front of you? So our goal was to make sure that we weren't worried about the backups. We knew we had them covered, but we wanted to say that if we needed to let somebody know that their records were compromised or tampered with, or an issue came up, that we knew who the list was. And that's a lot of the stuff that actually puts people out of business, is you end up in some sort of a lawsuit due to some negligence or some issue, and you can't reproduce that data. And now the whole thing of innocent till proven guilty, when it comes down to you being it and a patient or somebody wanting the records back, it doesn't quite work the same. You have to be able to prove that you were taking all the necessary steps required to secure their records and their files. So what worked well, obviously, we, as our client's IT company, we do all their backup checks. We do all of their managed services, all our infrastructure checks. So whatever it takes to actually get them up and running. So we check backups every day, we check the server logs every day, we check the event logs, we check the virus logs, we check everything that needs to happen on a regular basis. We do. I have dedicated engineers that take care of that. The purpose of that is so when something hits the fan on the Sunday that you weren't expecting it, that you're not going to say, oh my God, I wish we would have checked, or I wish we would have done the following, or I wish I would have had this in place. It's too late to make a wish and hope. That's not a disaster plan. Wishing and hoping is not a disaster plan. So again, that's really the key, is to have those things in place ahead of time. And that was I guess our claim to fame, is that we told them what we were going to do, and we did. And we just drove it down to the techs, drove it down to the engineers, to the operations folks, to the sales folks, everyone in place. This is what we do, this is how it happens, and we then checked it to make sure it happened. So that's what really, really worked well. So we had a disaster recovery plan in place. We basically threw it in the trash can because it was on such scale. I mean, everything we had planned on was just very localized disaster, fire, theft, but nothing like, oh, by the way, you're gone and your business is gone and half your clients are gone and the city is gone and the infrastructure is gone and where you were planning on going for your disaster recovery place across the city was also gone, and your employee might be dead. All that stuff that you usually plan on having in place in some level basically wasn't there in some case or another. So, I mean, we did use, I don't mean we threw it out, but we did use some pieces of it, but as a general rule, none of that stuff worked. So we had to make sure the foundation of what we deemed valuable had to be rock solid regarding what hit, whether it was an EF5 tornado, whether it was a fire, whether it was employee theft. So that worked perfect. And how we executed the recovery and it all came back was a whole another story. So that is what we had to invent on the fly. So there was a lot of challenges coming up. We had very limited infrastructure for communications, for services, to find people to really get the message out. There was a lot of things not working. People didn't have electricity, they didn't have internet, they didn't have water, they didn't have gas, they didn't have a lot of resources. And we had to come up with methodologies of either leaving the premise, the area affected, to provide those services. And then many of our clients didn't have offices. So now it's kind of like, oh, by the way, I have your servers available, but you don't have an office. Do you want to come to my office? Where do you want to? We had to come up with strategic ways, really creative ways of delivering services. UPS and FedEx wasn't delivering product to the city during a couple of days. I mean, you think about it, UPS and FedEx not showing up. So we actually shipped stuff to the neighbor city, and then were available just to pick them up. And in some cases, we actually exchanged computers and loaded computers from a UPS car in a parking lot of a convenience store. That was nowhere in my disaster plan. That was something that we just kind of came up with on the fly. Please ship everything to this convenience store and then let me know, and I'll have somebody there unload it from a convenience store. That was like crazy weird. I mean, how do you come up with something like that? But we had to do stuff that was out of the norm. We were open to all suggestions. What we had asked for our clients, our vendors, our staff was, I think I know what's not working, but I still want to know what my options are. So whether it is realistic or not is insignificant of the fact, but we need it to be an option. We were the biggest one that actually got hit. We had the most number of clients affected. The other ones had onesie, twosie type of clients, but the problem was they didn't have their own disaster plan in place. So when they got hit and they were, their customers were calling them, oh, I need back, it took them it took them a week to get themselves back up and running. That in lieu of us being up and running in 5 hours. So that's really the key things. You can't service your customers if you're not up. So if I'm an IT company and I can't bring myself back up, there's no way I can actually deliver services with no infrastructure for myself to my customers. And that's what they were going about it completely backwards. They were saying, oh, we're fine, we're going to deliver it, no big deal. And it really ended up that they weren't fine, they weren't delivering it, and there was a big deal because it took them a week to even get themselves, their websites, their services and stuff back up and running, and they only had 1 or 2 customers that had failed. We, on the other hand, had hundreds of machines lost, multitudes of servers gone, and our offices were gone, but they were all up in 72 hours, we were up in 5 hours. A couple things. You need to have yourself a real IT company. A real IT company is people that actually look for these problems, find these problems. Ultimately, it's not about just selling you a piece of hardware. I mean, there is a value added to it. You have to actually understand what it is, and you actually have to find a company that practices those things themselves. So, do they use their own backup solutions? Do they actually check their own backup solutions? Are they checking your backup solutions? So you need a real IT company. So if your uncle's cousin's brother works on computers and really good at gaming and Xbox, that's not an IT company. That is not a real company you want to actually do business with. You want someone that has people on staff, you want someone that has people on calls, you want someone that answers their phone calls on a regular basis, after hours, how quickly do they get back to you? Do they have processes in place? Is it just a hodgepodge because the owner has it in his head somewhere? Or is it something more than that? Does the operations manager know how to dispatch a ticket? Or is it just because you got to get a hold? Do you only want to work with the owner? Or do you want to work with all their techs? Those are the key things you got to ask, Get some proof, get some testimonials, find out who they're, you're entrusting your most valuable assets, your business, your AR, everything that's actually happening, you're trusting to this company. People look hard for these things, and then you just say, okay, I don't understand computers, forget about it. You've got to know these people, you got to understand them. Do they have a top to bottom solution? Can they do just file backups? Can they do system backups? Can they do virtualization? Can they do all the things that are important? And then can they deliver it? It actually fell in a couple of different categories. 20%, this is a year later right now, so 20% of the businesses that that in the city have not reopened and are probably not planning on reopening. A few of the 20%, and not that much, but a few of the 20% opened up, worked their accounts receivable, worked their payroll, worked whatever they need to for a couple of months, and then they decided, ooh, great, I got all my bills paid, I got all the money that was outstanding, the insurance company is giving me a nice hefty check, I don't even have to sell the building, I'm going to sell the land, and I'm walking away with a nice hefty check insurance claim. So it was an easier way for them to walk away from it without actually having to sell the business. And then they then sold the land or the property, whatever was there actually on top of it, so they actually got a nice walk away from it. And then some of them just decided that, you know, I'm going to just go work for somebody else. I was working for myself, it's just too much, etc. So they decided, you know, we'll just collect on the insurance and move away. So there is a percentage of the 20% that are as such. But for a general rule, we'd like to think that people who didn't really have a good plan and just selling your business and hoping for a disaster so you can collect on the insurance check is not a good business plan. They just didn't work too well. We really highly encourage that the people we're doing services for that are fully engaged with us. And that means, you know, we used to have customers that we did maybe backups and we didn't do some other processes, or we did some other processes, or, you know, we didn't do backups. We want to be completely, you know, involved. If it's our butts on the line to get you back up and running, and I want to make sure that your viruses are clean, your servers are running, everything's up to date, everything's up to code, you know. And if somebody isn't insisting on that, they're doing you a disservice. How can somebody say, I'm going to sell you antivirus, but I'm not going to patch your machine? I mean, you got to patch it. Those things go hand in hand. How are you going to have a backup solution, but you're working on equipment that's 8 years old that is expected to fail any day now? I mean, how are those things valid and logical discussion? So you want somebody that has, again, broad cover-to-cover solutions. And that's the thing that we really became insistent on is, you know, if you're engaging with us, then let's engage all the way. If you're just kind of half-piecing it here and there, I don't know what the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, that's not a good solution. It's not fair to you, it's not fair to me. So let's have that dialogue. So we had a lot of dialogues with some of our clients that were not engaged with us all the way and say, hey, we can do this. Ultimately, it's going to be cheaper on the long run if we just take care of it all in one pace anyway. You have basically one throat to choke. So why don't we just take that responsibility? Because they're going to come to us when something goes wrong anyway. And they're not going to want to hear, hey, I told you so at that time. It backups our clients every server every 15 minutes throughout the entire network. So every server gets backed up 95 times a day. We then actually not only keep a copy of it on site, we send 2 copies of it off site. We encrypt the data and send those off site. So we now have it on-site data. So I have 4 copies of your data at any given time. Obviously the one on your server, the one on my server in your office, and then we have 2 off-site. The whole purpose of that is belts and suspenders. We want to have multiple avenues of failover. So the on-site stuff gives me quick recovery. I can get your files back in minutes. And then the off-site stuff lets me cover in case your building is gone, the structure is gone, etc. I have even 2 completely different locations that we're backing up data to. And these are in cities, thousands of miles apart. So we have all of this stuff in place simply because, again, belts and suspenders. This is going to go for the next 3 to 5 years. We always are looking for volunteers, both in prayer, financial, volunteers from just a physical human force. And I tell you, one of the best things as always is the message is still there. We were a city that stood up to the plate, basically took control. We had all the roads cleared in 48 hours. All major and minor thoroughfares were cleared in 48 hours. And we were talking debris stacked up 10, 15 foot in places. So you are the key cog in your community. You're the key cog in your environment. Don't wait for it to happen for you. You just step up to the plate and do it. When you do it, others see, others watch, others take initiative. So if you're running a business, be a leader. You know, grow a pair, basically step up to the plate and take control. You know, you're not in business because you just, you know, you're moseying and coasting along. So step up to the leadership plans. You are responsible to your employees. You're responsible to your family. You're responsible to your employees' families. They expect a paycheck. They expect things to work, whether it's a disaster, whether it's a fire, whether it's anything. Your community depends on you as a leader, as a taxpayer, as someone that's involved in it. Step up to those plates and actually make a difference. I mean, it's, you know, the time is now. The person is you, so just do it.